Good afternoon. It's Tuesday afternoon, April 26th, 2022, and we're here for the interview of Bill Farmer. And I will start out by asking Bill to give us his date and place of birth.
Well, I was born here in Nashville, Tennessee, the old St. Thomas Hospital on November the 10th, 1947.
Tell us a little bit about growing up here in Nashville, your early childhood. And
All right, well, my father, my biological father, was named E.B. Sadler. He was a veteran, Army veteran, World War II, and he went to Cumberland Law School on the GI Bill. He didn't ever practice law, didn't take the bar exam, but he did run a car business, automobile business out on Gallatin Road. His twin brother, Harry Sadler, same thing. He was a Marine in World War II, went to UT Law School on the GI Bill. So those are the only two lawyers that I knew. Now, my father died when I was 3. So I wound up in St. Mary's Orphanage for 2 or 3 years. And then my mother remarried Buddy Farmer. And we moved to Madison. And I went to St. Joseph's grade school and then on to Father Ryan High School. I didn't think much about being a lawyer at the time. I was really interested in engineering. I got a scholarship to General Motors Institute out of Father Ryan and got into engineering, moved to Detroit, worked in a factory in Warren, Michigan, and then went to school on a co-op program in Flint, Michigan. I was 17 when I was up there, 17 when I graduated from high school. And basically, I think I was too young for the big city. Didn't do that well and transferred to Austin Peay State University in Clarksville. Meantime, I had joined the National Guard and went to Cook and Baker School in Fort Worth, California, Monterey, California. So I was a cook in the National Guard for the next 6 years. While I was at Austin Peay, I majored in marketing. I met my wife, Patty Farmer, who was a year younger than I, and she had gone to St. Cecilia here in Nashville. And I had gone to Father Ryan, and we had never met each other, but we both knew tens of people in common. So it was a real unusual meeting, and we were just friends for a while, but we got married in December of 1969. We were living in a little duplex off campus, and they started the first fraternity house at Austin Peay back in 1970. And Patty and I were asked to be house parents, which was free rent, but it almost cost me my marriage. You know, it was Patty did not enjoy being in a house with a bunch of fraternity brothers. So anyway, I got out of school, and my wife was working for the Leaf Chronicle. She was a reporter. She had an English degree, and I was selling cars for my Uncle Harry at the time, and had applied to UT Law School and was waitlisted for a quarter. And then we had somebody, the law school had someone drop out of law school. And so the dean called me at the car lot and said, "We've got an opening, but you need to come." And I'd already missed the first 2 weeks of law school. So
the dean actually called you at your place of work?
Called me at the car dealership. He did. He was on the wait list. I don't know if my Uncle Harry had something to do with that or not, but he did. And so I got up there and left Patty to pack up everything and get a U-Haul truck and move us to Knoxville, and that's what she did. And we stayed in Knoxville. I got to, back then they were on the quarter system, and we were struggling financially, and so we went straight through And, I think it's 27 months. I did 4 quarters, 2 years, and then the last quarter of or 1972. I'm sorry, 1974. Anyway, the law school was a really great experience. I enjoyed it. Made a lot of friends that I still have today from law school. The best offer I was able to get, one of my best friends was a guy named Robbie Baker. And he wanted to go to be a litigator, a trial lawyer, constitutional lawyer. His father was a dentist, and he was Justice William O. Douglas's dentist out in Forks, Washington. And so that's just the way he grew up. I, on the other hand, my only experience I had with lawyers were my uncle, and it was the car business. And I was under the initial thoughts of just becoming a businessman, going into some kind of business and using the law degree. So as we got through law school and everybody's applying for jobs and so forth, the best offer Robbie Baker got was doing a business law tax issues for a big firm called Eisenhower Carlson out in Tacoma, Washington. And the best offer I got was in the U.S. Attorney's office as a trial lawyer. So we just sort of switched career paths in that way. I still today teach at Vanderbilt Law School, and I tell the students there that you just never know where you're going to wind up. So make the most out of your law school career, but you can't plan exactly how things are going to shake out when you get ready to go into the market, to the legal market.
Let me stop you there. How did you go about getting the job at the U.S. Attorney's Office? You apply, or they come on campus to recruit, or how did that come about?
I applied. I had heard that they did have an opening, maybe 2 openings at the time. Fred Thompson was in the U.S. Attorney's Office and had been called by Senator Baker to be minority counsel in the Watergate hearings. And so that created that opening. That actually was the opening that I got. But it was, that was an experience. They did a full field background check with security clearance on me while I was in law school. And we were living in Island Home area of Knoxville, a very poor area. And there's a fellow next door to me that was a kind of a junk store operator, and he worked on cars, and he had car parts out in the yard all the time. And we had one driveway between us, and Patty was pregnant with our first child, Jonathan, at the time. And as we got closer and closer to the due date, he was just piling all these axles and fenders and stuff in the driveway. And so I came out and told him that you just got to clear this out, and he got irritated about it and thought I was just some kind of hot shot because I was in law school and all this. And so he cleared it out. And the reason I'm telling this story is because when they did the background check, I came home. I didn't know they were doing it. And I came home from school one day, and he comes over and says, "Well, Farmer, the FBI was out here asking about you today." And I showed him my badge. I'm a special deputy sheriff, which is something I think he just made up. But I thought, well, that's it. But thank goodness, whatever he told him, apparently they didn't put much stake in it, or he said nice things about me. I'll never know what, but it did concern me quite a bit. But anyway, I passed the background check and got started. Took Fred Thompson's caseload in the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Before we get into your career at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I'm going to go back over a couple of things that kind of piqued my interest back at the beginning. I don't want to get too far away from them. How long were you at St. Mary's Orphanage?
3 years.
3 years.
What
ages were those?
3 to 6.
Okay. And your mother married Mr. Farmer. And I heard somewhere along the line, you grew up here in Nashville, you spent some time in North Dakota or something.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Mr. Farmer, my stepfather, was a welder. He worked for Bethlehem Steel. And back in the early 60s, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, having to do with when President Kennedy was backing down Khrushchev and the missiles in Cuba. And as a result of that, the government contracted with Bethlehem Steel to build Minuteman missile silo systems all around the country. And so my stepfather started out in Conway, Arkansas, and then he moved to Tucson, Arizona. And at the end of my freshman year at Father Ryan, he moved, the job was in Minot, North Dakota. And my mother and myself, and there were 4 other adopted children that my mother took on, all moved to North Dakota for that year. And we stayed the whole year. They have a sign on the city limits in Minot that says, "Why not Minot?" And if you live there in the winter, you know the answer to that question. It's the absolute coldest place I could ever imagine being in my life. Walked about 2 blocks to school. I had aluminum frame glasses. The first day I walked into school, I walked in the door, they froze and fogged up, and I pulled my glasses off, and with the little pieces in my ear, my nose, boy, it hurt. But you learned how to cope with the weather. Great people in North Dakota. I think because of the ailments that everybody tends to look out after each other. So I enjoyed that year up there.
Well, you come from a line of entrepreneurs. Your father, your uncle, you had some other uncles I know that were in business. Did you get in the fireworks business while you were up in Minot?
Well, you've heard that story. Yes, we had a great business going with fireworks. We basically, I hooked up with the guy that ran the gas station's son. He was about my age. And we cut lawns through the spring and early part of the summer, made $300 or $400, which back then was a lot of money. Put every bit of it in the fireworks for the 4th of July because
how old were you at this point?
I was 14. And so his father would let us use the gas station corner to set up our stand, and helped us build a stand. It wasn't that big. Only one of us could actually fit in there at the time. And we had counters on it. We had just a big giant box of Roman candles and all kinds of firecrackers and so forth. And people would come by and buy them and all this. And we had this thing called a bottle rocket, which was 2 cents a piece. And you stick the stem in a Coke bottle and it holds it up and you light it and it goes up in the air. It just squirts up in the air. And so this guy would want to buy something. The only thing he could afford was the 2-cent bottle rockets. He's going to get 10 of them, but he wanted to see how they worked at first. So we set the Coke bottle on the counter and lit the thing off, and a big gust of wind came by, or a truck bouncing on came by, and it fell into the box of Roman candles, which was wrapped in cellophane. And of course, that was that. I mean, we were scrambling to get out of the box, the little setup that we had, and we had all the money that we'd made. We'd gotten back our $300, and we're starting to make a little bit of profit, but it was in a metal tackle box. And of course, it all burned up, and the whole thing burned up, and there were Roman candles going off everywhere. The fire department came, and they had to shut the gas pumps down. And oh man, it was something. It was something. But as bad as it was, I think both his dad and my parents did see some sense of humor in it. They weren't too hard on us, I think. But it could have been a disaster. But it's just one of those things that happened, and count your losses.
That's why they had hazard insurance, I guess. I don't know if you can anticipate all those hazards, but let's fast forward a little bit. You started college, you mentioned General Motors Institute. Tell us a little bit more about that.
GMI at the time was located in Flint, Michigan, and it was a school that you went year round. You'd go to work 6 weeks in a plant that you had to have a sponsoring plant. Every student had some plant that sponsored them. And my plant was a rear axle and pinion gear plant in Warren, Michigan, a Chevrolet plant. And each 6 weeks, you'd work in one department of the plant, and then you go back to school and go to school for 6 weeks. There also was another person that was had the alternative. In other words, there was an A section and a B section. So while I was in Flint, someone else was taking my spot in that production department, and then we'd switch. So they kept us going in that fashion, and it was a very efficient way to, I guess, get an education and learn how the factory works. So I worked in production and inspection, quality control, accounting. You go through all the departments in 4 years when you're done there, and then you're hired on as a regular employee. We're paid hourly while we were there, and we got union scale, which is pretty good. But then we also had to pay tuition at the school. So, but you made enough money to make it work. So that's how that worked. It was a great program. But anyway, I got up to differential equations and kind of hit a brick wall there. Not only could I not understand it, I couldn't understand what difference it would make if I did understand. So anyway, so
that's my understanding of differential equations. What difference does it make?
yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. But anyway, I got and I think I learned more about myself too going through that process. I enjoy math and science, but there's just I also like to find the argumentative side of things, and you just can't argue with the numbers. They are what they are, So that's that. But anyway, I enjoyed that experience while I was there, and then on to the Guard, Austin Peay.
Okay, let's keep moving forward to where we left off a minute ago at the U.S. Attorney's Office. When you joined there, who was the U.S. Attorney, and how many associated or assistant U.S. attorneys were there?
Charles Hill Anderson was the United States Attorney appointed by President Nixon. And there were 7 assistants at the office. Actually, there were 6. They added a position. Charles Fells and I took the 6th and 7th positions at the same time. Martha Trammell was there, Irvin Kilcrease was there, Joe Brown was there, Ray Whitley was there. It was a good group. The thing that looking back on it, this is 1974 to 1978 when I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office. The judges were Judge Frank Ray Jr., appointed by S.S. Kefauver, and Judge L. Poor Morton, appointed by President Nixon. And they had just started this Rule 11 process where you could actually agree on a plea bargain and present it to the courts. Neither of the judges initially had anything that they did not want to entertain any Rule 11s. They felt strongly that the sentencing decision was theirs and theirs alone, and they didn't want us bringing any plea bargains to it. As a result, the defense bar really didn't, and there weren't any sentencing guidelines back then. I mean, it was just a statutory maximum, that was that. And so as a result, the defense bar really didn't have anything to lose by going to trial. There was no such thing as acceptance of responsibilities, or you get points for that. You just try it or not. And so as a result, we tried a lot of cases. I tried 60 jury trials to a jury, criminal court cases in 4 years. Literally every month I'm in there trying something. They weren't complicated cases. A lot of them were stolen car cases or bank robberies. They weren't the complex criminal cases that we see today, but there were a few of them. And I really got a wealth of trial experience, I think, because of the rules back then. Really helped develop things.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I know the state attorney general, the local DAs may start off with the jail docket or non-jury misdemeanors, but it sounds like the U.S. Attorney's Office, you guys need to jump right into jury trials.
Right. We had a magistrate court for petty offenses, but normally you didn't have that many of them. Your clients were the federal agencies, the FBI and the Secret Service, the ATF and the post office, and those folks, and they would usually bring you a felony. The the thing about the U.S. Attorney's Office, you can't, if you're an investigating agency, you can't get a warrant unless you get it cleared by the U.S. Attorney's Office first. So they would always come in and ask. They'd have this and that, and they want to arrest somebody. They lay out their case if you tell them whether you thought they needed more or not. And when they're ready to go to trial or to indictment, it's the same thing. They seek your advice, and you tell them what you think you need in terms of witnesses and proof. You know, that symbiotic relationship, I think, works very, very well.
But were there tensions between you and the agencies like there are for those of us laymen in the civil side? Often tensions with clients who want you to take a certain position or certain tact or whatnot.
Occasionally, but I would say rarely. You know, we as prosecutors try to recognize what the agent's job is and how hard it is, and how important it is to make sure that they get their work accomplished, they get justice done. I mean, that's what they're all about, and they really believe in these cases. But sometimes they just miss something, and we tell them that. I think rarely did we take a case that did we refuse to take a case rather that they wanted to push, unless it just simply wasn't there. I do remember one tension, just kind of the opposite, that we couldn't dismiss an indictment once it was gained without getting permission from the Justice Department in Washington. You know, and we had a case one time, I'll never forget it. This guy was indicted. He had taken money. It was a mail fraud case. He had taken money to drill an oil well, and just ran off with it and didn't do anything. And so he was indicted after 3 or 4 years of not doing anything. And he, while he's under indictment, he comes back to the place and actually drills an oil well, and it hits oil. And so I said, well, there's just no way this is going to result in a conviction. And so we're going to dismiss it. So we did dismiss it. And the Justice Department sent 2 of their assistant attorney general's name to speak to Charlie Anderson about overstepping his authority by dismissing an indictment without getting prior permission from the Justice Department. And I'll never forget that what he told him. He said, I am the U.S. attorney. I was appointed by President Nixon, and my appointment was confirmed by the United States Senate. I'm a direct successor to Andrew Jackson, who was the first U.S. attorney, who was also appointed by President Washington and confirmed by the Senate. There wasn't an attorney general until 1870. Neither one of you guys have ever been appointed by the president or approved by the Senate. You know, so I did it, and you just, what are you going to do about it? And that was the end of that. They said, well, we understand your position. And back then he went to Washington, but I thought that was a pretty ballsy move that he made there. I did.
I remember you had one kidnapping case. My partner Alan Knight represented the defendant. It was kind of an inadvertent kidnapping. Fellow broke out of jail. Remember that case? Yeah. You stole a car, but it turns out there was a little girl in the back seat, and he didn't know she was in there. She was sleeping in the back seat, and I drove to Kentucky. So he crossed the state line. Boy, that was it. You know, it was kidnapping. Poor little girl. So Al did a terrific job defending that. But you know, I put the little girl in the sand. She was 6 or 7 years old, I think, at the time of the trial, and I asked her if she could identify the person who drove the car that night, and she pointed her little finger at him like that. You know, the little tiny finger. And then I looked at Al and I said, it's your witness. And I thought he was going to kill me. What do you do with that? You know, you can do anything with it. So anyway, Al was a great lawyer. I mean, super lawyer. we'll get to it later when we talk about your later career, but you talked about the types of cases you had that you prosecuted as a young lawyer there. And the types of cases changed, the so-called run-of-the-mill cases in the U.S. Attorney's Office over the years.
Yes.
In what way?
Well, you got into more complex conspiracies. You have drug cases with many people involved. They passed the Racketeering Act, which made some truly complicated cases. You have environmental crimes. You had a lot of things that simply didn't come into the purview of the U.S. Attorney's Office when I was there in the early 70s. But over time, they're there now. And you also have the sentencing guidelines, which make the whole concept of pleas a lot more different than it was. So the practice has changed dramatically. A lot less time, I think, actually in court. But when you are in court, you tend to stay there longer.
How many people in the U.S. Attorney's Office nowadays?
I couldn't tell you, but it's a bunch. I'm going to say 30 or 40, but I'm not sure.
Compared to 7 when you were there.
Yeah, right.
So I think you said you were there till 78.
78.
And what happened then?
78, Judge Morton, before that, what happened if you couldn't afford counsel in federal court? The judge would look out in an audience and see who all was there and just appoint somebody. And the lawyer would go out and talk to the client, then maybe come back and plead guilty or come back and ask a trial. Judge Morton just thought that was just not enough or a good way to do it. And he looked into this federal public defender program, which had began shortly after Gideon versus Wainwright in the late 60s. And he wanted to have a defender program in Nashville in the Middle District. So he applied to the AO and they granted that, and he chose me. I was a trial lawyer in his court. In fact, I had the Cookville division, which he also had. And so he saw a lot of me. Most of those 60 trials, probably 50 of them were in front of him. So he asked me to take that position, and I had decided already to leave the U.S. Attorney's Office. I was about to go into private practice with a law school friend of mine, and I told him that, and he said, he looked at me and he says, "Well, you're going to get that green check again every 2 weeks, and it's a lot bigger than it was when you're a U.S. attorney." And I thought, well, okay, then. I told him I would take it for 2 years, and just to get it started. Wound up staying 7 because it was just so much fun and excitement.
Let me stop you there. I didn't realize that the Federal Public Defender's Office was a product of the initiative of one of the local district judges, and not necessarily the administrative arm of the Department of Justice or something. But for the actions of the judge, it wouldn't have existed here.
No, it would not. Judge Morton made it happen, and based primarily on his desire. And Judge Morton was a FBI agent before he was a federal judge. So you'd think, and he was known, I guess, among the bar as a maximum moral, because he would give out pretty stiff sentences. But I think that was, he strongly believed in the fairness of the process, and he strongly believed in good advocacy for the defense. I mean, he just thought that was imperative, which is, I think, to his credit and to the credit of the bar here. So when he set this thing up, when he asked me to do it, he told me he'd like to have a panel of lawyers who were competent, and he wanted to get out of the picking them. He said, I want your office to control the training of these lawyers. When you have a conflict, you're going to take most of these cases, but you're going to have conflicts. And when you do, that panel, I wanted to know what they're doing. You have experienced people on the panel and to be trained and so forth. So that's what we did, and we set the panel up, and we started with 3 people. Myself, I could hire 1 assistant and 1 secretary, administrative assistant, they call them now, but back then it was a secretary. So I hired Lynette Ayler, who was Mr. Anderson's secretary, to be my secretary. And then Bob Tucker, was in the legal aid clinic, and he worked up in Knoxville at the law school there, and was highly recommended by Walter Kurtz, who later became the Metro Public Defender. And he was an outstanding criminal defense lawyer, and felt that was important too, to hire somebody with strictly a criminal defense background, because all I had done was prosecute cases. And surely enough, I mean, there were some folks that said, well, this is just going to be a sellout because you got the U.S. attorney being the federal public defender, you know, how's that going to work, you know? But I was determined to make that work. And I think over time we did develop the reputation of you could get as good at defense in that office as you could if you hired somebody.
Was there any friction between you and your former colleagues at the U.S. Attorney's Office?
Oh yeah. Using all their secrets against them. I got accused of that one time. Of course, I knew how the FBI worked and what they did and didn't do, what they should and shouldn't do, and I would catch them every now and then. They would get upset about it. But I think at the end of the day, for the most part, everybody felt that we were just doing our job. In fact, the judge would often say that in court, you know, when some frictions would come up, they're just doing their job. And for both sides, he said that about the government and about the defense.
Well, those secrets that you obtained in the U.S. Attorney's Office were available to other lawyers who went out into private practice who've been with the U.S. Attorney's Office as well.
Oh yeah, they were. And you know, the truth of the matter is, when you're prosecuting somebody for a crime and you're going to take their liberty from them for that, you know, you ought to be able to justify openly everything you've done to get there. You know, you really should. Now, I understand about informants and all that, but your process, you know, ought to be subject to scrutiny. You know.
But tell me about the administration of the office. You have your own budget, and how did you go ahead about selecting this panel?
Okay, well, the budget I'll take on first. The budget was based basically on your caseload, and so I looked north to Clarksville and Fort Campbell, and we could handle cases at Fort Campbell because it was federal. And they had a magistrate up there who was willing to give us cases, and he gave us a ton of minor cases, but they were cases and they counted. And so we built our budget bigger based on our caseload in Fort Campbell primarily. So that helped a great deal to grow the office. The panel itself, we had applications. We put out the thing, you know, you can get, and the pay wasn't much. I mean, I had $30 an hour, I think, or something like that back then. But you know, a lot of people wanted federal court experience, and so if you didn't have any, you could still get on the panel, but you had to second chair another lawyer for free for 2 or 3 trials until you could go off on your own. And that's how it worked. And then we would have we'd have annual seminars with the panel. Would have an annual dinner where we give out awards for whoever did something outstanding. You know, we'd make it a sort of a, you know, something that you'd want to be a part of if you were a good defense lawyer. So that's how it worked, and it's working still today. I think in great form.
Now, how many full-time employees did you grow the office with full-time employees?
Yeah. Let's see. We hired an investigator. The first investigator I hired was an active Metro detective, and he stayed with us 6 months, and the FBI hired him, stuck him right out from under us, you know. So then I hired the second one was a young Nightwatch Law School student, and he just now retired. Rich Moore stayed with the office, I don't know, 40 years, I guess, but he stayed with us. Then we got to hire 2 more lawyers and another secretary. I think we were up to about 8 when I left. And now it's, again, 30 or 40, I think, in the office now. But, you know, the caseload's gotten bigger. There's more federal judges. There were just 2 federal judges, and now I don't know how many there are, but there's a bunch.
And you mentioned the change in the prosecution, the level of prosecution, but I guess concomitant with that would be the types of defendants, types of offenses you had to deal with. What was the range of stuff that you saw the defendants of public defender's office?
Obviously poor people, a lot of theft of Social Security checks, that kind of thing.
What about public corruption?
Yeah, we had a couple of cases there. The biggest one, I guess, was the Earl Hawkins case. You know, where it was early on. It was, I think, 79 or 80.
And who was Earl Hawkins?
Earl Hawkins was the chief criminal court clerk here in Davidson County for state courts, and he had an office. And the allegations were, this is also one of the very first RICO prosecutions brought in the country, definitely the first one brought in Tennessee. And the allegations were that Mr. Hawkins' clerks and him were taking basically bribes from people who'd been arrested for DUI, driving under the influence. So if you had a DUI and you went to see the clerk's office, if you passed them $1,000 under the counter, they'd set your case in some Sunday afternoon in 2040. And it would just never show up, you know, and so that was that, you know, and this went on. There was apparently, I guess, 60 or 70 people that were brought to trial that had done that, had paid, and now turned government witnesses. So that trial lasted 14 weeks. It was in front of Judge Morton, and I was a public defender, and I had one of the deputy clerks. Hal Harden was a prosecutor. Bob Lynch was helping him, and he had 2 more lawyers coming down from Justice Department that were helping him. And it was a big deal. It was, you know, we had, I'm thinking there were 8 or 9 defendants. So the counsel table was full of lawyers. The defendants were sitting on the bench in the back. And it was quite a circus. It really was.
Was the chance that you were the only one getting paid at that point?
It may be. Yeah, it may be. I felt sorry for the people who were billing. And one lawyer, I won't say who he was, it represented a client on the understanding that he was going to plead guilty for this 14-week trial. And so takes a very small fee, I think it's $500, and goes down to court. Judge Morton asked him if he's guilty, and he said, well, not really. And that was the end of that. Judge Morton said, well, you're going to trial. And Mr. Binkley said, would Your Honor, please, I'd like to be removed as counsel. And Judge Morton said, well, no, in for a penny, in for a pound. And that poor lawyer had to sit with that client for 14 weeks. And of course, he wasn't a federal court practitioner. So he's reading the rules of criminal appellate procedure during the trial. Most of it, trying to get familiar with those rules, figuring he's going to have to appeal something at some point, I guess, but he wasn't nothing to do with the trial. But anyway, that was rough on him. And of course, I don't think anybody expected it to be as long as it was, but it just turned out that way. Judge Morton gave everybody Fridays off. He just tried it 4 days a week because he knew everybody had other business they needed to tend to. That was the only break they got, was that 1 day a week for that, you know. But it was an exciting trial, and I think it was good for the office that we tried that case, because the lawyers were relying on us, the defense lawyers, you know, for use of the library, for techniques and this sort of thing.
Where were your offices?
Well, another funny. So when we first started, very first started, they didn't have an office. They didn't have office space for us, but they hadn't filled Judge Gray's chambers yet. And so we had his chambers for our office. And that lasted about a month. And Judge Wiseman came and booted us out because they were judges' chambers. So they put us on the 6th floor of the courthouse at the end of the hall. And if you were an indigent person accused of a crime, you know, the FBI, whoever would arrest you, they would take you to the marshal's office. You get fingerprinted, and then take you down to the on the 8th floor, then take you to the 7th floor, and you would see the magistrate, and he would appoint you a public defender, and then they would show you where to go, and you go down to the 6th floor, and you walk past the Bureau of Prisons office, and then there's the public defender's office. And so, you know, I stayed there and I was raving Cain about that from day one. Took me, you know, about 7 or 8 months before I could convince the AO to let me out of there, and we bought a released place across the street. But you know, and it was right after that that they had, if you were coming into the federal building, you had to sign in. And I don't think they still do that, but they did back then for a while. And so, you know, the government would know all of our witnesses. They'd just go down and look at the list, and there they are, you know. So we'd have to meet the witnesses in the Sheraton across the street or something. So anyway, it's really unworkable. But we eventually moved, got out of the building. That was a good thing. And Henry Martin, who's now the public defender, has moved to an even bigger location to accommodate the big staff that he has. But they're still across the street.
So I think you said you were there till 78.
Oh, I started 78 and left in 84.
Well, where did you go from there?
I went to the Attorney General's office, State Attorney General's office. Mike Cody had become U.S. Attorney, and Bill Hubbard, who was General Leach's deputy.
General Leach was, who was General Leach?
Bill Leach was the Attorney General before Mike Cody. He had left to go State Attorney General to go into private practice, and Mike Cody became the new State Attorney General, and Bill Hubbard was Mr. Leach's deputy, and was Mike Cody's deputy at the beginning. Hubbard called me and said that you know, if you're ready to take on another thing, you know, how'd you like to come over here and be in essence, a Solicitor General or an Advocate General, run the litigation for the state AG's office. And I said, let me think about it. And I had always had this yen to go into private practice, just always, and still had. You know, I was loving what I was doing, but we had a bigger staff now, and I was getting into more of the administration part of it. We weren't trying as many cases as we used to. So I resigned, and that was hard to do that. It was I really loved the job, and it was tough. But I took the job in the AG's office with Mike Cody, and had a great time there. Tried a reapportionment case on the 1980 census, where they split Humphreys County into 4 different congressional districts. Won that case. That was an odd case. My good friend Bill Willis was representing the plaintiffs, who were a couple of legislators. What they had done is they filed one bill apportioning the state, and then they filed another bill in case the first bill got thrown out. And anyway, we had a trial, 3-judge panel, Judge Merritt, Judge Wiseman, and some judge from Chattanooga. I forget his name now. And it was interesting and unusual. You don't see those that often. I remember Judge Merritt was the presiding judge, but he didn't know the rules of evidence as well as Tommy Wiseman did. So he let Tommy rule on Judge Wiseman rule on the evidentiary questions. And then they went to lunch. We did it in half a day. It's not a lot of proof in those kind of cases. It's mostly a legal argument. And they went to lunch, came back, and Judge Merritt, in the old English style, read his or spoke his opinion into the record. He didn't have anything written other than the notes, and he just read the opinion. And he said, that is the court's opinion. You know, so we get it transcribed if you want to appeal it. So that's the way that worked. I thought that was a fascinating experience. But the biggest case that I loved in that 2 years I spent at the AG's office was the what we call the Scopes 2 trial. They had some fundamentalist Christians that lived in Rogersville, Hawkins County, that did not approve of the textbooks they were reading.
What was the problem with the textbooks?
Hmm?
What was the problem with the textbooks?
It offended their religiousness and sincerely held religious beliefs. You know, they list the books they had. Anything that had to do with magic was forbidden. They didn't believe in magic, or that kids should be taught anything about magic. They objected to the diary of Anne Frank, which I initially assumed was some kind of anti-Semitic thing, but it was not. The objection there was that, I don't know if you remember the diary or the story or the book, but there's a point in time when there's two families living in the attic, and one of them's a child named Peter, who's a young man, teenager, and they're rationed out food every night, but they don't have a lot of food. You just got to eat your share, and that's it. Well, Peter gets hungry and eats more than he should have, gets caught, and by his friends, and he's so ashamed, and he's telling Anne that how can there be a God to let us suffer like this? How can there be? How could God let this happen? And it's because of the doubt that the fundamentalist Christians banned that book from their reading of their kids. I mean, and there were like 8 families. Judge Hull was a federal district judge heading the case, and we had Cutler Pickering firm was hired by Norman Lear, who did All in the Family, to overturn this thing, and he represented the county commissioner of education, Hawkins County commissioner of education. And I represented the state commissioner of education.
Cutler Pickering represented
The county.
And Norman Lear is kind of a liberal activist.
You're right. Oh yeah, yeah. And so they're great lawyers. I mean, they came down and they brought trailers with all kinds of stuff in it. Brought a library literally on a trailer almost, and right down to Greenville. And the other side, the families were represented by this guy was, I cannot remember his name. I wish I could. He later became, I think, deputy governor of Virginia, and was a really good lawyer. But he was really, really, really good. And so with Tim Dyke was the lawyer from Cutler Pickering. He's now an appellate judge, federal appeals judge at the DC circuit. So that, I mean, some of the best talent I've ever been around in terms of trying a case. Judge Hull, though, he just kept saying, you look at me, he said, well, Mr. Farmer, we're only talking about 8 families here. Surely you can get a set of books that they don't object to. And I said, we got 800,000 students in Tennessee, and we just can't do it. They have options, they can homeschool, whatever, but he didn't buy it. So we lost the case in district court, got it reversed in the 6th Circuit. It should have been sent back, but there were people when we were taking depositions in Hawkins County. There were people outside the courthouse, or the bottom part of the courthouse, where we did some depositions that were just praying for our demise. It was really, really a hostile environment, but it was just a really, really interesting case. I enjoyed it immensely. Learned a lot from it, and that was kind of the peak of my attorney general's trial work. I did set up a training program for the trial lawyers in the office, and I went to Harvard for a 2-week course in how to do that. It's based on the National Institute of Trial Advocacy.
When would this have been?
This would have been in 1985. and about that time, there was an opening. Vanderbilt was looking for a trial ed professor, adjunct, and I applied for that, and actually I was asked to do that by Andy Shookoff, who was before he was judge. So that's when I started teaching trial advocacy in 1985, which I'm still doing today. And I do enjoy that. Students keep you young, keep you going. You know, you like to see them succeed, and you can see a sense of improvement over a semester in their ability to speak in public, and ability to frame questions, ability to analyze arguments. Watching that growth and encouraging it is really, really good. It's a good feeling.
I think I used to try lawsuits, and some of the fundamentals, knowing the rules of evidence and the certain presentation techniques, and how to, as you mentioned, how to frame questions, how to cross-examine. But in my later years of practice, it seemed to me that a lot of the presentation became to be a media event.
Yes.
You had more and more things videoed and preserved that way, and deposition spliced with video. Is that, how have you accommodated that in your?
Well, I always talk to him about it, and I don't, you know, I tell him my standing joke is, you know, when I was trying cases back in the 70s, you know, I just had a big old sketch pad and I'd write on it, you know, and that was my exhibit, you know, that's the way we did it, but now it's different. And that when you have something visual, it's effective, or it can kill you or help you, but it has an impact. It has a bigger impact than just words. So the visual is really important. We don't have at the law school the technology enough to set up like that, like I've seen in some cases. Judge Brothers Court, for example, it's got wonderful technology. You know, everything is taped and recorded, and you can play it back. And I tried a case there one time against C.J. Gideon, and he knew how that worked more than I did. He gets to the final argument. He's just playing snippets of the testimony that supported his case, one after another, boom, 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 and extraordinarily effective. So I think the use of technology is important today in trying cases. A lot more important. Well, just because it exists more than it did back then, you know. But I miss, you know, I think, you know, I remember when I was in high school, even they had the Powell Gurley trial, and there's two partners in the Chevrolet dealership. One of them killed the other one, was charged with it, and when he got acquitted. But every day you could read the whole story in the Tennessean, every day that it happened, and it went on for I think a couple of weeks. Those days are gone, you know. But back then, it was, the trial was drama, and it was, you know, it was what people like to listen to or hear about.
How long did you stay at the State Attorney General's office?
2 years, exactly 2 years.
Okay. And when you finished, when did you finish there?
1987.
And where did you go after that?
Started the firm finally. I got finally got in my own business. After 13 years with federal and state government, finally did it. And I opened up with Doug Berry, who had worked with the Attorney General's office, and Bill Purcell, who had was just running for the first time for a state house seat from East Nashville. And anyway, that's how we got started, the three of us. My wife was our secretary. We had an office on 2nd Avenue above an art gallery. And it was great. The first, one of the first clients I had was a conflict case from the State Attorney General's office, and it was representing the coach at TSU, famous football player.
John Merritt?
No, professional football player. And I cannot remember his name. I have to come back to that if I catch it. I'm sorry, but he was. It was pretty cool. He sent me an autographed football for my son, Oh, he just recently died. He was a record holder of all sorts of things.
Claude Humphrey.
No. It'll come to me. Start going to something else. But anyway, so we set that office up. Worked 4 years there. Bill Leach was at Waller at the time. And it's Waller, back then it was Waller, Lansden, Dortch, and Davis. It's now called just Waller, I think. But Bill was a partner over there, and he needed some help doing criminal defense. And he asked me to come, convince the partners that that'd be a good fit. And so they brought me on as a partner in December of '89. Yeah. And what was happening then, of course, the big firms normally did not have a criminal department or division at all, because most of their clients were corporations or white collar folks, and they just didn't see that much criminal activity. But what was also going on is that it was that, as we said earlier, the complexity of the criminal cases being brought were was increasing. So you have like healthcare fraud, which have impacted all these healthcare companies, and a lot of those cases are being brought. And because of that, I think the big firms started to recognize, well, maybe we should dirty our hands and have some of these criminal lawyers come in and help us. And so that's how that began. And I stayed at Waller about 11 years, long as I guess I've stayed anywhere. And great bunch of lawyers, good people, more money than I'd make anywhere else in my career would be there. And lots of clients, lots of activities. I mean, it was enjoyable. They would have summer associates come in and would take them down to Destin or somewhere in Florida for a week, I guess, during the summer, and had annual dinners, and
You should take the summer associates on a rite of passage of, and became a national tradition, icon, hot chicken.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Well, hot chicken. I'd first tell you how this all started with the hot chicken business in Nashville. Purcell and I, as I said earlier, we started our practice of law, and we're taking whatever we could get. And there was a hot chicken place down on the west side of the river under the Shelby Street Bridge. Columbo's, I think, was the name of it. But they had some disagreement with the state about whether they should have to pay sales tax because it was an agricultural product or something like that. I forget. There was an issue about it. And and they also had a little game of chance going in the evening hours there. So anyway, they needed lawyers. So, and they couldn't pay us much, but they did say, you can come in and eat with us when you want to. And so Bill would go down there 2 or 3 times a week. He loved that hot chicken, just loved it. I mean, loved it. I kind of liked it, but I couldn't go more than once a month because it just takes a while to get out of your system. But that's how he started loving hot chicken. And of course, later when he became mayor, every meeting from anybody out of town that would come in to see him, that's where he'd go after Princess hot chicken and eat hot chicken. You just had to eat hot chicken if you're going to have lunch with the mayor. That was the deal. To this day, he has annual Christmas gatherings from his staff at his home, and hot chicken is there in abundance. It's just there. But and I at Waller kind of adopted that because these kids that we had, they're from all over. Not many of them are actually right from Nashville, very few. But so they're not familiar with it, and so we'd go out to Prince's. They had to go out to Prince's. That was what they had to do, is eat this hot chicken. And at the time, there was a Baskin and Robbins ice cream store, kind of catty corner to it. And you go right immediately, go over there to get you a vanilla shake, and hope that helped, But those were good times. Those were good times.
While you were a welder, did you have a chance to do any public service work outside of the law firm itself, like judicial selection committees?
Oh, yeah, right. I was on the first judicial selection commission when that passed. Governor Wilder, Lieutenant Governor Wilder, this was his desire, is to have a commission that would give qualified lawyers to the governor to appoint, rather than the governor just appoint his buddies to these benches, or just based on politics. And so there were 12 of us on this commission, and we would drive all over the state every time there was an opening. And I served with Margaret Beam, and I would in Nashville. We usually would drive together. Usually, we're going someplace far, and we would go through the applications. We developed the applications. It was long. It required writing samples, and we'd conduct interviews of the candidates. And it was really, you hear so many jokes about lawyers and, criticisms and so forth, but it was really uplifting to go to some of these small areas in the state, Cleveland, Tennessee, or Dyersburg, and you'd have 4 or 5 applicants, and they'd have people talking for them and on their behalf, and all the great things that they did, and how proud of them, and how involved they were in the community, and how much they meant to their neighbors and to their church and to their government and all, and to the courts. And it was really uplifting to see that, and then we deliberate, send three names up, and did that for about 12 years. So saw a lot of judicial candidates come through, it was very rewarding. A lot of time involved.
Is this Court of Appeals, Supreme Court, or both?
All trial judge, Court of Appeals, and Supreme Court. Any judgeship that the governor had authority to appoint. Didn't do general sessions. But whoever, if the governor had to make a judicial appointment, it had to come through the commission, and you had to pick one of those 3. So you could weed out some people that just weren't qualified.
So, a product of that process, you have some confidence that the judges were going on the bench were competent and suitable for the roles they were taking on.
Oh yes, absolutely. You could just sense it. That good people. And the application itself. I mean, you've got to be serious to fill that thing out, because it was long. Had a lot involved. You had to do a lot of research on about yourself, and answer all those questions that we had on there. So it was a good process, good discussions too. I mean, we really everybody put their heart into it.
How long would the process take in a particular city, a particular judgeship?
Usually a day. Of course, it depends on how many applicants you have. Most we've ever been, I think, was 3 days down in Memphis one time. But it usually, we give people as long as they need to present whatever they want to present. Of course, and we'll ask questions too from the podium. But it took a while. That was very rewarding doing that. I really am happy to have done that and honored. The other thing, public service wise, I'm still doing is I'm chair of the Metro Civil Service Commission, and I've been doing that since 1999.
23 years.
Right. And it's mostly, man, I've learned more about Metro than I never knew. Metro had so many departments. The 1,000 employees, and another 1,000 in the healthcare government employees who aren't covered by civil service. But you got the water department, the fire department, the police department, public works, transportation. It's just it's all kinds of stuff. Mostly we deal with disciplinary violations. We're sort of in a final appeal before it goes to Chancery Court. There's first the appointing authority sets a penalty for some infraction. Then it's reviewed by an administrative law judge who hears it as in court. Then it comes to us de novo, which means we're not bound by his ruling, but we are bound by the record. And then after that, it goes on. So we've had some interesting cases like that.
Other than the honor at the start of appearing on public access TV, you get compensated for that too?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Right, nothing.
Show business is its own reward.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Channel 3, right. But we do the pay plan, which is very important. Trying to, today, for example, we're having a real problem hiring police officers and firefighters. And, we just have to keep pace. And so we present a pay plan to the council. And the pay plan, this is a political issue in some sense, because the council cannot monkey with the pay plan. They can either take it or leave it. So we try to make it so it works, but you can't pick out a department or an employee and give him a raise that's outside the pay plan. See, this was all designed by Cecil Brandstetter when the charter was written, and he did a really great job. Also, the human resources director is appointed by the commission, not the mayor. And in fact, the mayor has a lot to do with that because he works with her all the time. We see her, once a month. So we generally go with whoever the mayor would like to have, but it's designed to be apolitical. So your job at Metro is supposedly rest on its merits, and best we can try to uphold that.
So when did you leave Waller? I think you mentioned you were there about 11 years.
Yeah, I left Waller in around 2001. Around 2001, J.W. Luna and myself were both at Waller, and we decided we'd set up a smaller shop. Waller was just getting big, getting kind of bureaucratic. I mean, it's still a great firm. It's just, I just needed something smaller, kind of like General Motors to Austin Peay. It's just something smaller. And so we started a firm. Had it for several years, maybe 8 or 9 years. And then I had while I was at Waller, and Charles Burson was an aide, I think, to Al Gore, offered me the senator's recommendation to be the U.S. attorney while I was at Waller, and I turned it down. It's a financial issue. The pay was incredibly different, and I had 3 kids in college or about to be, and so I did turn it down. And I'll say this: if sometimes when the horse comes around on the merry-go-round, if you don't go get on it, there's no guarantee it's coming back again. Because I did want to do that, and later I tried again to get it and didn't get it. I thought when President Obama was elected, I thought I had a shot at it, and I was one of the few names that were sent. But Jerry Martin got that job, and he did a tremendous amount of campaign work for the president in Tennessee. I think he was Tennessee chairman or something. But anyway, the point is, if you really want to do something and it comes around, just take it, because it may not come again. And it didn't come for me. But while I was doing that, Jonathan, my son, had become a lawyer, and he was practicing in a small firm in this building. In fact, Ken Jones and Will Hawkins, and so I went in with him and enjoyed practicing with Jonathan. It's nice to practice with your son. It's a lot of fun, very rewarding. But anyway, I was there for until I'm basically semi-retired now. Firm's gone in 2 or 3 different directions as we're all getting older. I guess that's kind of it.
Well, I think that kind of brings us full circle. Covered almost 45, 50 years of, well, more than that, but of law practice, 45 years
Yeah, yeah.
of practice. So unless anything you want to add to,
The only other thing I think I'd add is my relationship with my church and my high school. I think I served on the board of Father Ryan High School as the chairman for 5 years, from '98 to '03, during which time we were under renovation. And before that, the move from Ellison Place to its current location in Oak Hill. And we put in when I was chair, we added a theater and a library to the existing campus. And the theater, we spent $175,000 on a fly space, which I didn't know what it was at the time, but you build your set on the floor and then you raise it up above so that the audience can't see it. And then when it's time to run it, you just lower it back down and it's all set up. So it's cool. But I enjoyed that. And my daughter was a theater major at Swanee, and she wanted to do theater. And when she was doing theater at Ryan, they had all their performances in the cafeteria. That's what they used, you know. So I was proud of that. It's kind of minor, but I enjoyed working with their tuition assistance program too. But education is it's where it's at. It's just where everything is at, I think. And you know, we're just running on social media now and Twitter. And, critical thinking is
at a premium.
and absolutely necessary. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think we'll close on that. Congratulations on a great career.
Well, thank you, Frank. And thank you, Frank. I've enjoyed our time together.
I hope there's some more.
Well, not just here, but in the years past.